General of India, New York, USA. And we have stalwarts like from Empire State Development State of New York, from ICICI Securities, Stoicus Legal, and of course, our partner, Indo-American Global Chamber of Commerce, and our leadership, Mr. Pankaj Bora, the regional president.
Hi, everyone. Good evening to all our members and guests who have joined from India. And good morning to all the participants who have joined us from USA and Canada. I'm Pankaj Bora, the Regional President, West India Council of Indo-American Chamber of Commerce. First of all, on behalf of entire Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, I welcome you all to this very important digital session. As you all are aware, the main objective of Indo-American Chamber of Commerce is to promote trade, commerce, and investments between India and USA. In continuation of that effort, today we have organized this program focused on a specific geographic location, which is offering tremendous business opportunities. Yes, this is New York, an ideal base for Indian business community. Today, we are glad that Honorable Consul General, Mr. Randir Jaiswal, the Consulate General of India to New York, is with us. Who can be a better person to explain to us what New York has to offer to Indian business community and how Indian mission in New York can help us. So on behalf of entire Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, I welcome you, sir. I welcome you to this program. And we look forward to hear your keynote address. As we all know, New York is a financial, cultural, and media capital of the world. It is generally said that had the New York been an independent nation with its GDP of $2 trillion, would have been the 8th largest economy of the world. With two largest stock exchanges, New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, and headquarters of many Fortune 500 companies, New York has emerged as a very important financial center of the world. Besides finance, New York is also a global hub for many other sectors of the businesses, such as fashion and retail, media and entertainment, pharma, biotechnology, scientific research, fintech, that is financial technology. New York has also, over a period of time, has developed into a very preferred destination for the startups. It has a very entrepreneurial ecosystem with the support of scientific research and venture capital investments. So nowadays, high-tech companies are preferring to start their businesses from New York. Needless to say, New York has the best infrastructure. It is well connected with rail, road, airports, seaports, waterways. But besides this, what New York is offering to the Indian business community, we have a team of experts from Empire State Development, New York State. They will tell us how Indian companies can start their business from New York and what they have to offer to Indian companies. But before we start this session, I would also like to thank our associate partner, Indo-American Global Chamber of Commerce, for supporting this program. And for the information of all the participants, I would like to inform them that if they have any questions, they can post their questions on Q&A box or in the chat box. So once all the presentations are over, during the question and answer session, we will take their questions and try to reply all the questions. So without taking much time, I would like to invite Honorable Consul General, Mr. Randir Jaiswal. And before I do that, I would like to give a brief introduction of Honorable Consul General. Mr. Randir Jaiswal is a career diplomat. He has been in Indian Foreign Service from 1998. Mr. Jaiswal has over 2 decades of diplomatic career, and he has been part of diplomatic missions in Portugal, Cuba, and South Africa. Before taking over this prestigious assignment of Consul General of Consulate General of India, New York, he was also deputed and worked with the President of India as a Joint Secretary managing his international relations portfolio. Mr. Jaiswal is proficient in Portuguese and Spanish, and he speaks these languages with the same ease as he speaks Hindi and English. Today, we are glad to have Honorable Mr. Jaiswal with us and look forward to hear from him what New York can offer to business community of India and how Indian mission in New York can help business community. So it's over to you, sir.
Well, good morning, everybody here in New York and this part of the world. And good evening to those who have joined from India. First of all, warm greetings to all of you from the Indian Consulate here in New York. I'm delighted to be participating in this conference, and thank you very much, Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, for your gracious invitation. Mr. Bora, Pankaj Bora, thank you for your warm words. I must also thank Mr. Mridul Pathak for his reach out and for his invitation, and all the distinguished members and panelists who have joined us today. First of all, we are living in difficult times, challenging times. I must convey my condolences for the precious lives that we've lost in the pandemic in India recently, in the second surge, and elsewhere in the world. We have received excellent support from the government of the United States, from business community here, from the Indian American community here, and from the American people and friends here in general to fight COVID-19 in India. I thank all of you from the bottom of our hearts for your strong support and your solidarity. We all need it. Together, we can overcome this challenge. We look forward to a continued engagement in this regard. We are here to discuss an aspect of India-US relationship which is so strong, so vibrant, so expansive. That is India-US economic relations. The roots of this bond goes back to the days when we traded in tea and ice, to today's world where we are trading in and engaging in high technology products. The history is long and the world of India-US economic relations is huge. In this engagement, obviously, we've had excellent contribution, participation, and support of the chambers. There are a large number of them who play a pivotal role on a daily basis to push and progress this relationship. And among those, the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce has played a vital role. So thank you very much, Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, for your strength, for your commitment and dedication to India-US economic ties. I have been engaged with India-US relations for long, and I had the opportunity 10 years back to work very closely with Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, Calcutta chapter. So I remember those engagement and those days of close coordination very well. I was delighted to learn then and today to recollect once again that the roots of Indo-American Chamber of Commerce goes back to 1968, when when Ambassador of the United States to India, Mr. Chester Bowles, founded this particular organization. And today you have countrywide presence, not just in the metropolitan cities, but also in state capitals, in the north and south, and several cities. So that gives you a lot of strength. You have a countrywide presence, you have countrywide membership, and that adds a lot of value to the ongoing two-way engagement. As all of you know, New York is home to a large number of Indian companies, from defense to financial centers, banking, logistics, pharmaceuticals, startups, innovators, biotechnologists. A lot is happening and a lot will happen in the next phase of our engagement. My own understanding is that we are going to see focused attention, focused engagement. Lot more Indian companies in these fields, in the new fields, will find a happy home in New York, given the kind of strong business ecosystem it has, the strong support, ease of doing business it has, strong financial support, legal support, other policy support that it provides, and the value that it provides, being at the center of the world in terms of economics, technology, and finance. Knowledge partnership, India US knowledge partnership is key. We have ongoing collaboration. A lot more will happen as far as educational collaboration is concerned, research collaboration is concerned, collaboration between fintechs, between startup. As you know, India is one of the most vibrant ecosystems in the world. We have over 50,000 startups, and with some 50 unicorns. Last this month, month of April, in 1 week's time, 4 Indian startups were valued as unicorns. So that was a very happy news for the startup community in India. Then again, the field of innovation, the field of renewable energy, health, new age technology, all these are areas where a lot more will happen. And I'm sure in the days to come, we'll have a lot more Indian companies finding footprint, finding a toehold in New York. Another area which is very important and where India is providing fast solution, providing many options to consumers across the world. Consumer choices across the world, and especially here in this part of New York, is changing fast. People are not now more sensitive to environmental concerns. So consumer choices, for that reason, obviously, today people want or opt for sustainable choices, sustainable products which have less carbon footprint, products which are friendly to the environment. And in this regard, I think India is very well placed to provide for the kind of consumer choices that people are looking for here in New York. Be it cane products, be it Wonder Foods, be it wellness products, uh, health products, traditional products based on Ayurveda, many such things. So that is one area where I think Indian companies will find a happy ground, a happy market, a very accepting market here in the United States. Uh, Here in the from the in the consulate, we have had engaging relationship with all chambers of commerce, and we look forward to our continued engagement with Empire State Development. We are based here. I think together we can do a lot many things. We can have focused buyer seller meet. We can do some hand holding for Indian companies together who are looking for new options here, new partners here, and we look forward to working with all of you in several of these areas. Please do reach out to us. We have a very expansive business agenda, a business portfolio, one of our focused area of our work. So we look forward to not only partnering and strengthening our partnership Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, but also with the Empire State Development. Uh, with that, I wish all the participants a very engaging and fruitful discussion. And I look forward to the panelists for your guidance, what you have as experts to provide to Indian companies and those here in New York who are looking for new tie-ups with companies back home in India. Thank you very much. Thank you once again for inviting me to this digital workshop.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your address to all our participants and recognizing and appreciating the work being done by Indo-American Chamber of Commerce in the domain of Indo-US relationship. I'm also thankful to you for accepting our invitation at a short notice and in spite of your busy schedule, joining this webinar. And we hope that business community of India will be in constant touch with you, and we look forward to your support as usual. So thank you very much, sir. And now moving on to the next speaker, I would like to invite Mr. Srihari Marar, who is the director of India Office of Empire State Development, New York State, to deliver the theme address on today's webinar. Mr. Srihari Marar, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bora. Greetings for the day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Srihari Marar, and I handle the India operations of New York State and is based in Chennai. Let me begin by thanking the Consul General Randhir Jaiswal for his time and being with us today. So I want to extend our sincere appreciation to the IACC team, especially Mr. Bora and Rocky, for this opportunity and inviting your members as they look at their growth plans in North America. And finally, I want to thank each and every one of you today for joining in. So let me start by quickly introducing Empire State Development. So the Empire State Development, also known as ESD, is the Chief Economic Development Agency of New York State. ESD encourages business development, job creation, and support local economies across New York State through efficient use of loans, grants, tax credits, and other forms of assistance. Now, let me give more background on ESD India office. The India office was set up in the middle of 2019, and the main objectives here is to help Indian companies understand the opportunities available in New York State and help them navigate through the regulatory aspects of setting up businesses and help them to make the right and best decisions for their growth in North America. We have had missions to India in 2019 and also in 2020, where delegates from ESD team met with the leadership team of several Indian companies who are interested to expand to North America. And some of the industry sectors included manufacturing, pharma, biotech, information technology, and research and development. In the past 2 years, we have seen several large Indian firms in several tens of billions of dollars to even very small firms we have helped navigate through their decision-making process. And whenever I meet a lot of companies, the one question that I always get is, what about the cost of operating in New York State? So I should tell that if you look a little beyond Manhattan and New York, the costs are very, very competitive. For example, in upstate, in Buffalo or Syracuse or Rochester, the average industrial electricity cost is about 4.7 cents. That's about 3 Indian rupees. That is per kilowatt, which is almost 30% less than the US national average. And if you compare this with India, the average rate of industrial consumption for electricity is about 6 rupees in India. And this is a big difference, 3 rupees in New York upstate versus 6 rupees in India. Also, I just want to highlight some of the assistance that the ESD India office provides. So at a very first step, if a company is interested to expand to New York, we would help them by giving a lot of stats and data that would help them make their important decision. Some of this include insights on labor availability, the skill sets of some niche labor, the cost of such labor, the cost of land, the cost of electricity, and some of the main clusters and the taxation and all of that. And once the company reviews these data sets and expresses an interest, we would make the relevant introductions, which includes connecting with accountants, law firms, and we would also start arranging site visits to various shortlisted locations. We really want to handhold companies during the entire course of their operation, and want firms to succeed here and be the India brand ambassador for New York State. So for those who want to touch base with me, I'm based in Chennai, but accountable for the whole of India. My coordinates would be shared later, and please feel free to reach out in case you have any projects or any questions, and I'll be happy to connect and discuss. So with that, now I would like to pass to Mr. Bora, who would introduce the other speakers we have from ESD team. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Hari. Thank you for a brief introduction of Empire State Development and its activities. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Edward Kowalski and the entire team of Empire State Development, who will be making a presentation to showcase their activities and how the Empire State Development can help Indian companies to have their base in New York. On behalf of ISCC, I would like to welcome all the members of the team. We have Ms. Lauren Merkel, Vice President, International Affairs of Empire State Development. We have Mr. Mark Reynolds, Vice President, Strategic Business Development. Mr. Michael Morse, Vice President, Strategic Business Development. Mr. Satya Tagat, Director of Industry Development, and Mr. David Whipple, Industry Manager. So all these experts on the subject, they will guide us as to how the New York can be a base for Indian companies. Mr. Edward, please.
Good evening for our friends in India, and good morning to the ESD team. Again, I think we're generally very proud and honored to have the Consul General provide comments and guidance for this activity, and we're frankly extremely grateful for the Indian-American Chamber and what they brought to the table. This isn't the first time that ESD has asked for assistance from the Indo-American Chamber, and they're frankly always gracious and spot on to help us continue to build this relationship. So with that in mind, I think we get into the meat of the presentation. Next slide. We've heard a little bit about what ESD does. Frankly, our mission is to create prosperity for the citizens of the state of New York and for the businesses that operate there. In terms of an investor looking at New York State, what we're able to do is look at the whole business, orient them to look at the state and all its assets. We do offer financial incentives for companies that qualify for several programs that we have. We think we're particularly strong at assisting small business. We have a division that provides services to small businesses for companies that that are new to the state or unaware of the geography or where frankly the best places to locate might be. We can offer real estate assistance as well, working with our sub-state EDO partners as well as the real estate the community, and obviously we're able to use our marketing assets as well to the betterment of all of the projects that we do have in New York. Next slide. Again, an ever so short geography lesson, but businesses considering New York State as a location, not only find a location in the United States, but you find a location, frankly, very near several major population centers beyond the city of New York. You'll also find that New York shares a border with Canada and Canada's major cities. For those a little bit unfamiliar with the Canadian market, you'll find almost 90% of the Canadian market within about 100 miles of the border, and New York has a very long border with Canada. So the major cities of Montreal, the capital in Ottawa, and Toronto are all very proximate to our borders, as well as major American cities such as Pittsburgh and Boston and Philadelphia. Next slide. This may seem a little bit strange to our Indian visitors. We as an economic development agency break the state up into 10 distinct regions. Each one of these regions has some very unique physical attributes: cities, roads, waterways. They also have independent almost economic structures, and each region has a slightly different economic mix. Each one has generated an economic development plan that highlights their strengths and frankly the direction forward that those regions want to be moving in. So it's more than Manhattan, it's Long Island, it's some very rural areas upstate sprinkled with medium mid-sized cities, with both quality of life attributes as well as very strong industrial bases. Next slide. Sort of highlighting the infrastructure that's available: airports, roads, rails, and for those again a little unfamiliar, not only do we have the ports of New York and New Jersey, but because of the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Great Lakes offer us an opportunity to have both river and Great Lakes ports. They're open most of the year, not the entire year because of our winter ice, but it offers an affordable alternative to some of the more traditional transportation routes. Next slide. Yeah. Again, a little bit about Empire State Development. We are a global looking agency through both the Strategic Business Division and our sister division, Global New York. We maintain offices that frankly are our eyes and ears and boots on the ground in various locations, with Srihari being in Chennai, covering India for us, but we do have these other locations of international presence. I will say parenthetically that any Indian company making investments in New York gets access to this network as well to help support their international sales activities. As a company registered in the state of New York, we make that network available to those companies as well. Next slide. And now, at this point, let me turn it over to my colleague, Lauren.
Thanks, Ed, and good evening, everyone. I echo Ed's thanks and the team's thanks here for including us to the IACC and the Consul General. We're thrilled to be a part of this. and share a bit more about New York State with all of you. So on a macro level, we just wanted to speak briefly here about some of the programs that are happening in New York. We've, of course, been busy and tasked with COVID-related projects over the past year, but look forward to building back better. The governor has announced over $150 billion to our infrastructure program. That includes roads, rail, LaGuardia Airport, Penn Station in New York, if you're familiar, in Midtown, where a number of the suburb rail lines connect in with the city and the subway system. We also have a very aggressive green agenda. We've announced the largest offshore wind agreement off of Long Island and New York City area. My colleague Dave Whipple will speak to that shortly. As well as research. So New York State has an abundance of private and public universities throughout the state, and we pride ourselves in the R&D that goes on here. And also venture capital. We often hear about California, but New York is number 2 in terms of venture capital investment. And Empire State Development actually has a venture capital fund which is available to businesses that set up in New York State and are in qualifying industries. So New York is a robust state. We have a number of different sectors in our ecosystem. You'll see a listing here. Based on those who've RSVP'd to attend this webinar today, we wanted to focus in on a few of these strategic sectors. So our colleagues are joining us to represent both ICT, tech and fintech, as well as energy and renewables and manufacturing. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Mark Reynolds and Satya Tagat, to speak to the first one, ICT.
Good evening, everyone in India, and good morning to everyone here in stateside. New York has a long history of developing the information communications technology industry in New York State. This dates back to just after World War II, when IBM developed its Watson Research Center in downtown New York City, and has grown to the point where we have 127,000 plus jobs in the IT, computers and electronics industry. Some of this is software-based and communications-based, but a third of those jobs are actually in the hardware semiconductor manufacturing space, both IDMs and supply chain. The ICT industry represents about 3% of New York's gross domestic product, or 59 billion. And with what we all see worldwide news, with pictures on the automotive industry and the semiconductor industry, we expect that to grow handsomely in the next decade or so. One of the reasons why we've been able to sustain the ICT industry is the deep R&D, research and development assets that are extant in New York. So I mentioned IBM. They've been in New York for over 100 years. Their artificial intelligence hardware center is a $1 billion investment in upstate New York to research the silicon and alternative technologies required to support artificial intelligence. Cornell University, one of the 2 Ivy League universities in New York State, has a national, federally funded nanoscale user facility. So any company that wants to do research and development on silicon can participate in that facility and run experiments, or have Cornell run experiments. We have Brookhaven National Lab, which is associated with Stony Brook University down on Long Island, which has been funded by the federal government since after World War II, and a number of other research facilities ranging from communications to photonics. New York has about, one of the interesting things about the ICT industry is to stay on the leading edge and maintain the market demand that the industry requires a lot of research. And we see about $5 billion in annual research and development in New York State. So if you do the simple math, it's almost 10% of the gross domestic product. And I think that represents a very bleeding edge situation, which we tend to support with state dollars from time to time. I will pass the next slide to Satya.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm Satya Tagat, and as mentioned, I'm a Director of Industry Development here at ESD, and I lead our efforts in the financial services and technology sectors. And our mandate is to help make those companies as successful as possible so that the state benefits from the corresponding growth in jobs and in investment. And as many of the attendees in the audience know, the way that finance, insurance, and technology have evolved in recent years is towards almost a convergence where insurtech and fintech is where all these industries are heading. And New York has benefited from this industry development because of our heritage as a hub for finance and insurance, as well as our growth in the tech sector for the last 20 years. So when you have the companies like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs already here, and over the last 20 years, the ecosystem has also attracted companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon. You get a really special talent pool and source for idea generation and product development for companies that are seeking to both partner with these types of companies as well as disrupt them. And what we've consistently heard is that New York is unique and differentiated because it offers such depth in both finance and technology. You'll find that certain geographic locations specialize in one or the other, but New York is pretty unique in that it has an incredible depth of industry in each field. And it's not just New York City. Buffalo has emerged as a top hub with major employers like Geico and top accelerators like 43 North. Rochester has also developed an incredible cloud computing and blockchain hub. And the presence of multiple top-tier universities like RIT and others in each city has helped build the pipeline for future growth. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that we have a number of key organizations around the state whose entire mission is connecting early stage companies or mid-stage companies with the larger players in the space in the hopes of advancing product development and mutual success. So examples of these include InsurTech New York and the FinTech Innovation Lab. And with that, I'll turn things over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Satya. We'll turn it over to Dave Whipple now.
Good evening. My name is David Whipple. I'm the industry manager and lead for our clean tech and renewable energy industry sector. Something that I want to point out right off the bat is that New York State has really a nation-leading demand for renewable energy set forth under the leadership of Governor Cuomo is the Climate Leadership Community Protection Act, which mandates by law that New York State has 70% renewable energy by 2030. This is a nation-leading commitment, and it also creates an incredible market demand. So this has spurred a lot of activity in key industries, including onshore and offshore wind, solar, energy storage, including green hydrogen, lithium ion, and more, and other related clean tech sectors. So there is a lot of stuff going on right now in renewable energy in New York State. Next slide, please. So when you couple this demand with the assets that New York State has, it creates a very fertile place for companies in the clean tech renewable energy sector to develop and grow. So some of these things include, through Empire State Development, Excelsior Jobs tax credits, which are enhanced for green projects, meaning that they can be a little bit more generous. Additionally, the New York State Energy Research Development Authority, or NYSERDA, has constantly grant funding opportunities becoming available. Additionally, through NYSERDA is the New York Green Bank. This is a $1 billion clean energy and sustainable infrastructure investment fund. And you will see that, that they have funded some large projects, including Plug Power and a whole variety of others, both in the development of factories for clean energy products and also the deployment of clean energy. Additionally, and this was touched on briefly earlier, the low-cost power in New York State is a big attractive feature for companies in manufacturing. And in certain parts of the state can access even lower cost green hydropower, which come from places like Niagara Falls and the St. Lawrence Seaway hydro generation stations. Finally, additionally, the New York State Battery Energy Storage Technology Consortium, or New York BEST, is a great reference or a great organization to help companies in energy storage. And finally, New York State has a lot of physical assets. These are industrial parks, which were formerly large campuses for IBM, Kodak, and are currently have been made into business parks where smaller businesses can lease or purchase space to start out, and makes it really kind of move-in ready for businesses. So thank you very much, and on to my next colleague.
Thanks, Dave. We'll move to Mike Morris now. Do we have Mike? He might be on mute.
Can you unmute Mike? Vishnu?
Sir?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, perfect.
Sorry about that. So New York is home to leading manufacturing companies in a variety of industry sectors. And as you saw from one of the earlier slides, we have a number of them that we administer through our strategic business division that has a statewide territory that focuses on specific industry sectors. We also have regional offices, as Ed touched on earlier with one of the maps. And those 10 regional offices deal with manufacturers as well as other types of businesses in the small to medium-sized category. In the strategic business division, we have a number of key accounts that we work with, and we also work with attraction efforts that come across our transom in our various sectors. The three sectors, as an example, in manufacturing that I work with currently are transportation equipment, materials processing, and industrial machinery and systems. There are a number of Fortune 500 companies that are listed on the slide in these sectors, and some of them have their global headquarters located in New York and or major and multiple production facilities, and also R&D operations. For instance, General Electric and Corning Incorporated have their global R&D operations located in upstate New York. In the transportation equipment sector, we are the leader in North America when it comes to rolling stock and rail car manufacturing. Alstom, Bombardier, CAF, Kawasaki. So there are a number of supplier opportunities given the 70% U.S. requirement, content requirement that exists with many of the contracts that come across for transportation equipment companies to bid on. We also have companies moving aggressively into the hybrid drive and electric powertrain mode. And those would include Nova Bus, which is part of the Volvo Group, and BAE Systems, which isn't listed here, and it's one of Mark's companies that is involved in defense manufacturing and hybrid drive transmissions for buses. We have major players in the materials processing sector and industrial machinery and systems. General Electric, ITT, Gould's Pumps, Raymond Corporation, many opportunities in the supply chain for those companies. Next slide. Thank you. As touched on by some of my colleagues, in addition to our incredible infrastructure, we have an incredibly productive workforce, from elementary education all the way up through colleges and universities, and ongoing education for skill set specific manufacturing and advancements in technology. New York State supports businesses directly, as well as local and regional workforce investment boards. We have also the Center for Advanced Manufacturing Skills and Institute for Advanced Manufacturing that can provide very specific training for high-tech industries. Financial support is available for, again, Ed touched on it a little bit earlier, but it's available for startups as well as well-established businesses. We want to be your partner when it comes to locating a facility here, creating jobs, and helping your business hopefully grow over time. We want your businesses to be incredibly successful in the state of New York. And to help you get there, we have tools such as capital grants, loans, tax credits, refundable tax credits, and as David touched on, some quote unquote green tax credits that are enhanced tax credits to promote the renewable and green sectors. Also, very important for manufacturers, there is no sales tax in New York State on machinery and equipment. Most states have sales tax on machinery and equipment. We do not. We also have a 0% state corporate income tax rate for manufacturers, which sets us apart from many other states. Technically speaking, we have a number of entities around the state that assist through our Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program. We have centers of excellence that are industry specific and centers of advanced technology. Most of these are related to colleges and universities that specialize in supporting certain types of industry sectors. We have Alfred University in the Southern Tier that is part of our ceramics corridor, for instance. In the North Country, we have the Center for Advanced Materials Processing, the Cornell Center for Materials Research in the Southern Tier. We have Green Manufacturing Center in the Finger Lakes area. We have the Institute for Advanced and Sustainable Manufacturing. Those are just some examples. And New York State is a partner in all of these, if not the majority funder of these entities. So whether you're coming through our door for the first time or you've been here for 100 years, we're going to treat you equally and provide any and everything we can to help you be successful in the state of New York. And just lastly, a few statistics to show where we rank among the 50 states when it comes to the quality of our educational facilities and our workforce. Number one in the Northeast in STEM graduates, number two in the number of scientists and engineers, number two in R&D expenditures and investments, and we're number three in the US with the number of patents annually. So that gives a picture, hopefully, of the depth and breadth of our manufacturing sector. And we look forward to having the opportunity to speak with those of you who are interested in pursuing opportunities here as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So reiterating a little bit of what Mike just said, we have a talented workforce ready for your companies. We, of course, understand how important workforce training and development is. It's a strong priority here in the state. As Mike and others have mentioned, so these unique industry university partnerships are all throughout the state. We're the only state that has 2 Ivy League universities, Columbia University in New York City and Cornell University in the Southern Tier. And then finally, this is about the support that we provide. So once you are set up in New York State, you have access to the entire portfolio of programs that ESD offers, everything from potentially venture capital funding to export assistance through the Global New York Division. And last but not least, we of course want to mention quality of life. New York is a great place to live, learn, and play. Property taxes are capped at 2% increase annually. We have a number of places for continuing education. And of course, lots of arts and culture and natural beauty, places to hike and enjoy throughout the state, should you choose to relocate here. So that's it for us. Thank you very much. This is the contact information for Srihari. We'll also put it in the box so that you're able to get in touch with us. But thank you very much for listening and joining us to learn about New York State this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Edward and Lauren and entire team of Empire State Development for a very informative presentation on New York State and how and what kind of opportunities are there and what it can offer to Indian business community. The insight provided on various sectors of businesses by each of the experts was very, very useful, and I hope all the members will be benefited by this useful information. And I look forward to more inputs from you during question and answer session. Before we move on to our next presentation, I would like to request all the participants to please post your questions on Q&A box or chat box so that our experts can reply to your questions. Now, after this very useful presentation, I would like to invite Mr. Varun Krishnani, who will share with us his experience in New York. Varun Krishnani is based in New York as the head of business development in North America for ICICI Securities. Varun has been working with ICICI Securities for more than 12 years and has been member of their strategy team responsible for Asian markets. He has a good experience of working with Indian companies in New York and is going to share his experience with us. It's over to you, Tarun.
Thank you, Pankaj. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you and your family are healthy and keeping safe. I have the honor of sharing with you New York, a state of opportunity for Indian business. As a disclaimer, I'd like to mention that the research and views expressed here are my own and do not necessarily represent my employer, ICICI Securities Limited. All right, I'll first dive into the historical trends of how cumulative foreign direct investment has moved into the United States of America over the last 2 decades with a focus on New York State. The US has attracted over $4.5 trillion worth of FDI until 2019, out of which $600 billion came from Japan, 500 from United Kingdom, and a bulk of it came from the developed world. While the developed world continues to pour into the US a huge sum of foreign direct investment as a percentage of their individual gross domestic products, it goes to show inherent strength and confidence these countries have in the United States economy and vibrancy. While the developing world, which is investing in its own growth at this moment, has a lower share of FDI in the US, but in the recent years, the BRIC economies led by China are catching up in a big way. As we can see here on this slide, in the trend of how India's FDI in the US has gone from a paltry sum of $100,000 in the year 2000 to $5 billion in 2019 and $3.5 billion in 2020. Interestingly, Tata Tea was one of the first Indian companies to take over a company twice its size internationally, Tetley Tea, to make the second largest tea company in the world. This was the summer of 2000 and was a watershed moment in Indian business where it gave goals and ambitions to Indian corporations, some of which started to look internationally, trying to seek growth, stability of raw materials, capital, and also product and research development, which were either lacking in India or were available in a big way overseas. I see this trend that has begun at the turn of this century gaining significant momentum in this current decade. The states which attracted the bulk of the FDI were New York, California, Texas, Illinois, in that particular order. New York State has the most Indian company presence, followed by California and Texas. It would be interesting to note for all the participants that in these 4 states, more than 30% of all Americans live and reside and call home. And this is also some of the places where the biggest cities in the Western Hemisphere are. According to a report issued by the Confederation of Indian Industry, as many as 155 Indian companies have invested over $22 billion, thereby creating 125,000 jobs in the country over the last 5 years. In an estimate, more than 5,000 jobs are created every year by Indian companies in the New York State area. This slide gives us some of the Indian companies operating in the New York State. Tata Consultancy's North American headquarters are in New York City and continue to be one of the top employers from India in the region. TCS has a significant and growing presence in North America with over 30,000 employees and 450 locations around the country. Some of you may be aware that TCS is also the title and technology sponsor of New York State's flagship marathon. Infosys too has a large presence in the New York State area. Since 2017, Infosys has hired over 13,000 employees and opened 6 digital and innovation centers in the region. Indian pharmaceutical companies have been coming to the tri-state area in a big way since 2000 to gain foothold in the United States. In October 2015, Dr. Reddy's set up its US headquarters in Princeton and New York City. The largest single investment over the last decade came from Sun Pharma, which acquired Taro Pharmaceuticals in 2010. More than a third of the revenues of Sun Pharma now come from the US market alone. Sun Pharma is the #1 pharmaceutical company in India and the 9th largest generics maker in the US. Taro, which was acquired in 2010, gave Sun a huge boost in formulations, research capabilities, delivery, and significant growth in numbers. Taro Pharma is headquartered in the hamlet town of Hawthorne, which is a brisk 50 minutes ride from downtown New York City. While New York State offers one of the best investment climates and incentives to attract FDI from overseas as covered by the Empire State Development Team, I will be highlighting some of the other softer reasons on why to choose New York. It attracts one of the best global talent and a hugely diversified workforce, which forms the core of why companies choose to come to New York. New York is also home to one of the largest Indian diasporas. New York metropolitan region alone houses more than 650,000 Indian Americans, which is also the largest Asian Indian population in the Western Hemisphere. Cost of borrowing for opening businesses is at an all-time low and likely to remain here in the near future. This has given a big fillip in the housing market and has supported prices of assets. New York, which continues to remain the center of capital markets in the world, has over 14 companies listed as ADRs on the New York Stock Exchange. As a conclusion, as the vaccination drive increases to gain momentum across the state, New York State looks very well poised for an economic reopening powering out of the pandemic. I believe that we're likely to see a huge growth in momentum in foreign direct investment from India into the United States, with New York being a key beneficiary. This rate of change of momentum will be driven by ambitions of entrepreneurs, growth in Indian economy, large interest from HNIs and ultra HNIs looking for smart businesses on the New York Stock Exchange, and real estate needs outside of India. And as India continues to open up its economy, lower capital controls will also give a fillip. I will not be surprised if we see India doing an annual FDI into the US up from the current $5 billion to $10 billion in the middle of this current decade by 2025. And a bulk of this would continue to come to New York. Thank you.
Varun,
over to you, Bob.
thank you so much for providing information on operations of Indian companies in New York State and the opportunities and facilities available in New York State. Thank you so much. And now, for the benefit and information of those entrepreneurs who are thinking of entering New York State or moving their businesses or establishing their offices in New York State, I would like to provide information on the legal side. And we have with us Mr. Kaushik Rajan. Kaushik is the founder of Stoicus Legal, a leading corporate law firm in Hyderabad. The firm's mission is to transform the entrepreneur and investment landscape, which chooses to serve its clients in a different way from that of the traditional law firms. Today, Mr. Rajan is going to tell us what are the legal issues those are to be taken care of while investing in the New York State or United States. So it's over to you, Mr. Rajan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bora, and thank you very much to both the IICC and the ESD teams for having me here. This will be a short and sweet presentation, and a word of disclaimer before we start. I am a qualified lawyer, so if there is any specific query that requires guidance from local US counsel, please do feel free to seek that advice. And this content is purely informational and not intended to be legal advice. Having also said that, I hope everyone is safe, healthy, and at home. We're going through a terrible time, and hope everyone sticks together and sees this out. Right. Now, some of the investment structures that are relevant when entering the United States. You will hear two kinds of entities. One is a corporation, and the other is a limited liability company or an LLC. Corporations are of two kinds, C Corp and S Corp. Both corporations and LLCs offer the advantage of limited liability for their owners. However, there are some fundamental differences in both the incorporation process, in that the corporations are slightly more document oriented. They require more compliances as opposed to LLCs, which require less paperwork. If you are going the C Corp way, there will be two layers of taxation. One will be a tax on income at the C Corp level. The other will be a tax on dividend at the shareholder level. With an LLC, however, there is a tax flexibility that's afforded. You can have a pass-through, or if you go the C Corp way, then your LLC income would be taxed. Generally, my experience has been that investors are way more comfortable with a C Corp than they are with an LLC. And a C Corp is better for corporate shareholders, and as opposed to LLCs being better for HNIs. If what I were to distill it into in the Indian context, then a corporation would be similar to a private limited company, and an LLC would be similar to a limited liability partnership. Some of the legal aspects now, when you enter, you are going to have to choose between a joint venture and a wholly owned subsidiary. Which is the right choice? It depends. The wholly owned subsidiary structure is used more for IT, biotech, and pharma companies. So you have to be cognizant of the visa requirements for your immigration because you need a team over there. When entering through the JV route, please be aware that you need a due diligence conducted. There may be complex negotiations with the JV partner. You have to build trust. Be aware of market exclusivity conditions, whether it's only for the US market or whether it's global. And who will own the IP? Will it be the JV company? And how would that be treated if the JV were to be wound up? When investing from India, 400% of net worth is what you're allowed to invest as per the last audited balance sheet. And Form ODI has to be submitted to the AD bank. Now, there is a state tax called a franchise tax, which is payable to the states where the business is chartered. That may vary depending on the net worth or the value of capital stock. Please also be aware of transfer pricing issues if you have an Indian entity which is going to enter into an intercompany agreement with your US entity. Procedure to establish an LLC, it's very, very simple. In New York, most of it is online. You hire a registered agent, you get the company's name, and you file the company's articles of organization. And you also have to adopt the company's operating agreement. That's similar to what we in India call a shareholders agreement. And in New York, you need that. Apply for a federal identification number for tax and employer purposes and register as an employer. The offline mode consists of you getting insurance and arranging for a weekly publication. What do startups need to think about? Right, where to incorporate, where to headquarter, and where to operate from. These may be in completely different jurisdictions. Ease of incorporation is something that's definitely a factor when you decide which state to incorporate in. Availability of talent and how cost effective the real estate is. Where do your customers reside? Where do the investors reside? In my experience, I've found that if you raise capital in the United States, you tend to get more founder-friendly clauses than you will if you raise capital in India. You've also got to think about whether you're going to go the C Corp way or the LLC way. If you're going the investment way, then a C Corp is preferred. Tax structuring, we did speak about how a C Corp will have 2 layers of taxation as opposed to an LLC. We also spoke about franchise tax and an operating agreement. Now, if you are going in for a structure where there is a US parent and an Indian subsidiary, and there are Indian shareholders who own shares in the US parent, be aware that there may be an element of round tripping, which may require RBI approval. Lately, we have been coming across a lot of startups who have been inquiring about flip structures. There are 2 or 3 permutations which are possible over there. Each of them has its own pros and cons, and that's a separate discussion altogether. I won't get into that for now. Why New York? There is an abundance of advisors. It's the best place you can get the best advice. Contract law is very well settled. There is very low possibility of any disputes because it's nothing left for ambiguity, and that's what you always want from a jurisdiction. As a consequence, negotiations are shorter, so the transaction costs of entering into a negotiation are lower. Counterparties also find New York predictable and comfortable. As has already been covered, it's a hub for economic and business growth. And that's about it from me. If there are any questions, happy to interact in the Q&A or offline. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaushik. Thank you very much for providing information on how to start business in USA and how to incorporate a business entity in USA, and more specifically, why one should enter New York, and what kind of legal ease of doing business is available in the New York. So now I would request Mr. Srihari Marar to take up the questions which have been sent by our participants and pass on those questions to the respective speaker.
Sure.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bora. So we have a lot of questions. So as we are running short of time, I'll just take the top 3 or 4 questions. So most of the questions are revolving around the VC funding and investment. So I'll take the first one. I think what are the qualification to get VC funding? The presentation mentioned some top sectors are covered. Can you explain a little more on the sectors that are there and what are the qualification to get that VC funding?
I don't know if I can take a shot at this and maybe Satya has something to add. So our VC fund supports companies in a number of different sectors. A lot of them are focused in health, digital health. Women and minority-owned businesses are also a priority. The VC fund helps companies that are located in an area, usually outside of New York City, where there's a dearth of venture capital funding. So those are, some of the parameters of that program.
Yeah, and a couple things I would add is that, so for that program specifically, in order to ensure that all the transactions are done at market rates, the state will invest in conjunction with a regular third-party VC fund who will handle a lot of the underlying valuation work and financial analysis. And so the two funds, the two entities would jointly lead that fundraising effort. But in terms of serving as sort of a conduit and more of a networking aspect, that's something that ESD can do as well. So even if it's not the formal investment capabilities by our actual VC funds, ensuring that you have the ability to connect with accelerator programs and other types of incubators is something that we're happy to coordinate.
Yeah, and let me chime in that the state certainly is interested in investing in companies, but typically we co-invest. So I think as Satya rightfully pointed out, building a knowledge base and building out a base of other potential investors, whether they're in India or you find additional investors in New York, will be important. Typically, we would require any company, not just an Indian company, but any company to raise $2 for us to chip in for one. And so the life of raising venture capital for these companies is always ongoing. But ESD certainly plays an important role.
And I would add one final thing to that. The New York Ventures Fund, which is ESD's internal venture program, does require that the organization have a presence in New York State, be it some sort of office or manufacturing or some sort of a presence. But I do work with them pretty frequently, and they do have quite a few connections with other venture capital firms around the area. So I think they're a good resource, regardless, even before establishing that presence.
Okay, thank you. So the next question we have again is more on incentives. So what is the minimum employment to get incentives, and what incentives are available for manufacturing and clean tech companies in specific? And also, if there is are there any incentives of exporting outside of USA to NAFTA and other markets?
I'll jump in on the clean tech piece. So there are a variety of different funding opportunities available, many of which are through NYSERDA, or New York State Energy Research Development Authority. They do have a page, and you can sign up to receive email updates. They have a list, and it covers a variety of different applications, primarily around the deployment of clean energy. So I encourage anyone to visit NYSERDA's web page, and we can put that in the chat or Q&A, and you can sign up for those updates. Specifically through Empire State Development, this is primarily for manufacturers in New York State. Like I mentioned before, we do have Excelsior Jobs tax credits, which is a very commonly used program for us at ESD. And there's a green enhancement. We can be more generous with a company that is in renewable energy or clean technology. And I can put more information as well on that in the chat. Additionally, the New York Power Authority, or NYPA, has programs for manufacturing. And likewise, if it's a clean tech or renewable energy application, they can typically be more generous on their packages as well. So those are just some. One final one, the New York Green Bank, again, that's a great resource. That's through NYSERDA. So I can follow up and put some links in the chat for these. And yeah, so just a few highlighted programs there.
Thanks, Dave. So one more question we have. So what is the average borrowing cost from a financial institution in New York, and how much one can borrow locally? Ed, do you want to take a shot at that? The average borrowing cost?
I'll take a shot. I know our mortgage rates for homes and general real estate transactions are reasonably low, certainly under 3%. And the ability to frankly find those kinds of rates are fairly widespread. New York State has a loan program that offers to help offset the cost of machinery and equipment in some real estate activities as well. We're certainly above that rate. The state, when it makes these loans, isn't trying to make money. What we're trying to do is stimulate economic development activity. I believe those rates are in the area of 5%, but I'll take a note to pull those rates and make sure that all those that are online will have access to those those rates as well. I will say that in some international transactions, we've seen in a few cases international banks, in one case an Indian bank, get involved in real estate and mortgaging as well. So I would encourage investors to check with your Indian banks as well, who I'd say used to stay out of real estate investments, but now I think are taking a more active interest in trying to get involved in underwriting some of those transactions.
Thank you, Ed. That's all we have for questions at the moment. Over to you, Mr. Bora.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the entire team of Empire State Development for providing additional information and clarification to our participants, and specifically about the financial incentives and support available for starting business in New York State. So now I would like to invite co-chairman of our associate partner of today's program, Indo-American Global Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Mridul Pathak. Mr. Mridul Pathak is a dynamic leader who has been actively involved with Indian diaspora in the USA. He has been playing an important role in promoting trade, commerce, and investment between India and the USA. In the initial years of his career, he was associated with governments of India and Nigeria, and subsequently he was involved with the private sector companies promoting e-commerce in New York and many other joint venture projects in India. I would like to now invite Mr. Mridul Pathak to give remarks on Indo-US business relationship and to propose a vote of thanks on today's program. Mr. Pathak, it's over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bora, and thanks to most of the participants who are genuinely interested in New York. I would also like to express my heartfelt condolence to those who have lost their lives, lost their dear ones in India, which is very, very heart-rending. But I would say this is also an opportunity for the concerned industries in India to set their foot in the soil of New York. Never before in my last 50 years of overseas, I have seen it, the bilateral relationship between the two countries attain such a productive and trustful relationship. And it is growing. More importantly, the two countries have come closer to the extent that in New York, probably every country feel at home. Every community feels as if it is their own land. And I would say when I was trying to come to New York, I went north, south, east, and west of the country, including Canada, with my wife and son, many, many years ago. And suddenly, those days, US was ethnic. Texas was southern, California was western, that sort of thing. The moment I landed in JFK and LaGuardia, I felt as if I'm at home. I see some fellow Indians, and I saw first time a magazine called The Economist freely distributed in LaGuardia Airport. And so I told my wife, here is the place. And then she took up the job with the New York Health and Hospital Corporation. After that, of course, it's another story. Things have changed. She moved to Texas, but I remained in New York. I would say that the technological innovation for which West Coast was famous has been outpaced by New York. And you will be surprised to know there is a Tata Innovation Center in the Roosevelt Island, developed jointly with the New York State and Cornell, and also Israel Institute of Technology. There is a tremendous opportunity of the tech groups from India to now set foot in New York. And many people think that New York is very expensive. It's just the opposite. Anybody of any budget, any purse string, whether for living, for moving, or running day-to-day business, have their own facilities to get. I have seen that, and I have helped myself number of companies who came here almost with nothing and who are doing very good business in New York City as well as outside the New York City. So with this, I would now probably like to thank the Consul General who agreed in the last very moment, and in spite of the busy schedule, that the consulate is busy for the pandemic in India, it really, a tremendous thanks goes to Mr. Ranjit Jaiswal. Even though I requested him to depute one of his, assistants or commercial officer, but he chose himself to come on the scene. And Indo-American Chamber of Commerce in India will have many, many productive opportunities if they contact the Consulate of India. Of course, thanks goes to EDC, because it is not only today. About 12 years back, Mr. Seth Pinsky, who was heading EDC, he came to inaugurate the first economic conference of ISCC India in New York City in 2009. So our relationship goes a long way. And I would not mention all of them because the EDC sponsored this particular seminar or webinar. And the entire team, including Srihari of India and Ted and Lauren from New York, have given an excellent viewpoint for the Indian companies who are greatly in number these days, keenly looking for an opportunity to come to US, and nothing can be better than New York State in terms of opportunity, low cost capital, good living condition, and to be Indian in New York. If somebody is aware of Jackson Heights, If you go to Jacksonite in the evening, you wouldn't believe that it is not India. Everything is available there. ICC, of course, ICC Western Region, Pankaj and Rakhi and their team, they have done a wonderful job. This was very, very overdue. And I thank you for not only for this one, but also for many other initiatives that you have taken. And definitely with the support of Mr. Rao, the National President, Mr. Kaul, the National Vice President, I thank all of them for this particular webinar. Thanks goes to Varun Krishnani, a young man. He has given a wonderful, wonderful figures and supporting statistics, which will encourage and which will enlighten many other people, including those who are resident in New York itself. And of course, there are some of the IIGCC members, Tarun, one of them, Nita Bhasin, Jayant Borkar, Ashok Ramsaran, Adris, who are all attending this. I'm sure they, and Mr. Ali Hirzi of Citibank, formerly of Citibank. I thank all of them to help me in getting things done whenever there has been an opportunity for ISCC. And by the way, I must remind all of them that ISCC Western Region was the only organization which brought a all-women delegation to New York City, and which was hosted by the then Consul General in the Consulate Ballroom. So I thank you all, including sponsors without naming, and I thank the Consul General once again for addressing this beautiful webinar that you people have done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Pathak. Thank you so much. So now we formally conclude today's webinar. Thank you all the participants. Thank you all the speakers.